After I made a video explaining why I cut ties with the cartoon community due to its increasing toxicity, I have learned a lot more about their moments through more research. As stated previously, despite me liking cartoons, I am no longer part of the cartoon community and have been trying to focus more on myself as a person and my well-being. But considering that a lot more has been found out that I have learned, you would think it would be an addendum, but no. I decided to talk about the top 10 worst moments in the cartoon community. Before we get started on this video, I decided to talk about my experience and the history of the cartoon community from the mid to late 2010s to the early to mid 2020s. So, as you may know, I joined the cartoon community around the same time the Go Anime community fell into decline since the website's downfall in 2017, and was more of an outsider among them. While the cartoon community's notice is not much talked about before the 2020s, the motivation over why I'm part of the cartoon community in the first place was because not just I want to make some fan art everywhere I do so of newer stuff that I never heard of and just want to give a watch. There are also a few cartoons that I like that I personally enjoy and want to talk about. Nicktoons shows like Jimmy Neutron, SpongeBob, and Fairly Odd Parents, Cartoon Network shows like Mixels, Adventure Time, and Courage the Cowardly Dog. During my involvement, like most community members, we used to do a lot of stupid things like looking down at animation styles, slandering hated characters, and cyberbullying real people in the entertainment industry, which we will talk about them in this video. From my experiences, is this the worst community of all time? No. While the community has its ups and downs, there is no denying that the cartoon community has a lot of problematic aspects when you look back all the things that they have done, and more recent ones that they have done. For better or worse, in the 2020s, the beginning of the decade of the worst year of all time, well, one of them, I have started to notice that the cartoon community would still milk the hate bandwagon, and as you may know, the Little Mermaid live-action remake caused me to permanently cut ties with this insufferable community. Yes, this is a petty reason, but being racist towards an innocent actress who did nothing wrong but portraying a character is what really made me turn my back against the Go Anime community of the 2020s. And I am still gonna say that I'm never going to engage in certain dramas ever again after this video. With that said, I'm going to cover a few notes before we get started. This video will be based on my experiences within the community, including a few more in-depth look at the points I covered in a previous video from this community, but the few other complaints that would be featured in this video and the history within this community. That being said, let's start. Showtime. Number 10. Silencing opinions. This is basically the common thing about the cartoon community. Similar to certain communities, they would often see your opinion as if it was a crime. Previously, I had made a few statements that would lead to an opinion bashing, but I feel like there's a few more examples in terms of opinion bashing. I remember when the Emoji Movie was released back in 2017, the one person had made a post mocking a fan of the said movie on DeviantArts, and yet they still claim that's a ripoff to certain movies listed here. As cringe or bad as it may be, it's actually not as bad as anyone would think. Another example of opinion bashing is streaming services, as they would have a major preference for physical media. I wouldn't say that they would give up on physical media, but I feel like their obsession with physical media is becoming unhealthy. As a person who likes physical media, I like both of them, but I still watch streaming services these days. As some of them I wanted to give a watch and a lot of catching up to. But they would often say, do not support streaming services, buy physical media or pirate them instead. This is basically how to not form an opinion, as there is a clear thing called freedom of speech, but they likely did not get the memo. And I feel like it's still mandatory in the cartoon community to keep opinions to ourselves. Whenever we talk about the opposite opinion, well, they would berate you for having the opposite opinion. This was likely the case every time. Surprisingly, the "I respect your opinion" term was often used outside the GoAnime community. But unfortunately, as I said, opinions are no longer the case in this community. At least some cartoon community members knew what an opinion was. By some, I mean a handful of members who knew what an opinion was these days. Number 9. Bashing on reboots. Despite reboots and remakes being far from perfect, they may or may not have plenty of fans. But most of the hate base is from the cartoon community themselves. One wildly targeted reboot is actually Teen Titans Go. People have panned this show as, according to them, it's not faithful to the original, it ruined Cartoon Network, or the most ironically stupidest reason to hate this reboot is, it ruined my childhood. They would sometimes use GoAnime style nicknames and refer to them as Teen Titans Stop, or the most common nickname that they would give the show would be Toddler Titans No. Literally. Despite what others may say, it shouldn't even be regarded as a continuation, as it's just more of a standalone series, or in this case, its own series, or possibly being based on a comic series. As a person who used to bash on this show, and is the fan of the OG Teen Titans, I feel a little bad for the people who made it. They actually tried to make it its own series. Plus, it did give me a bit of chuckle every now and then, before I hopped on the same exact boat and just wanted to fit in. Two more examples that had to be included and mentioned would actually be Powerpuff Girls and Ben 10 2016. And again, similar to Teen Titans Go, they would make hate art and memes out of them. Someone in the original video had told me that there are a few unpleasant moments within the Powerpuff Girls reboot, and you wish I was kidding. I am not, as it literally featured the one episode that is definitely not intended for the younger audience, as there's not much to say due to everyone and their mother talking about it. And I can only say that bashing on a reboot is started becoming flat out unhealthy, as they are still bashing on Teen Titans Go even despite it having a 9th season, let alone being a decade old. As for the remakes, they are basically a hit or miss for some people, whether they can be at their peak or not. This is still a similar case for the reboots. While it still has plenty of fans, the cartoon community has been on the verge of hate because they claim it's soulless or a cash grab, which is not true sometimes. Are there remakes that are well received? Yes and no and maybe. However, it started becoming annoying to the point where they think it's still the early, let alone entire 2010s. I'll get to the certain remakes pretty soon. Number 8. Their beef towards preschool shows. There is nothing wrong with liking preschool shows as long as it's not unhealthy and sane. But this community didn't get the memo. Like the GoAnime community, they would treat preschool shows as if they're their arch enemies, and they would often make hate art out of them, akin to grounded videos. While some preschool shows have plenty of fans, the same could be said about the modern ones, which they have the serious beef with them. While yes, outgrowing them is an understandable reason, the same cannot be said about ranting and raving on them. Yeah, throughout this ranking, I'm actually referring to PTBF 2002, or Peter Anime, as he has numbers of reasons why. He has made false ripoff claims and has a hatred for Lincoln Loud torture, but this is mostly from the beef towards them. Not liking them wouldn't be a problem had he not took his beef with them too literally. That, and not even caring that Janice Burgess has passed away 2 years ago. That's okay if you're not a fan of certain projects, especially from preschool shows, but this is clearly a bit dodgy when you think about it. But the biggest and possibly the worst example of the preschool hate base is Barney and Friends. Oh boy. We all know Barney the dinosaur, as he is one of the most beloved purple dinosaurs who is very friendly and would often teach kids many life lessons with his 2, later 3 friends, for better or worse. While I'm not much of a big fan of him myself, I feel like the hate base is definitely worse. where the anti-Barney humor and the hate base is definitely capable of harassing the cast, crew, fans, and the creator online for no reason other than his voice. Remember, this show is aimed at preschoolers, yet they literally had the audacity to make a innocent purple dinosaur as a freaking punching bag. While some preschool shows aren't perfect, again, it's great that they want to watch them because they want to relive their childhoods, but harassing them and having a serious beef is not an excuse whatsoever. Number 7, their hatred for animation styles. For the past 3 entries, I have talked about the many instances of bashing. Already I haven't even talked about the art styles. Well, there are so many art styles that the cartoon community hates. One of them has to be flash animation. Whenever there's a reboot or a new season of an older show, it will be bound to have a new animation style than a traditional art style. Don't take this with a grain of salt. I do like traditional art styles, but I feel like the cartoon community would be butthurt over them, as they would claim that it's very janky. But there's 2 more I have to talk about. They also hate 3D animation, or CGI, as they would claim that it's incredibly ugly. Otherwise, there's no insufficient evidence about the CGI hate base, as there is a lot, I mean a lot of successful 3D animated shows or movies with CGI. But possibly the worst offender of them all, at least according to the cartoon community, has to be the CalArt style, aka the Bean Mouth. Well, introduced in the early 2010s by the infamous John Kay, they would trash, slander, and harass people for making this art style. Similar to flash animation, they would describe it as overuse. To add insult to injury, they had literally made a post about the Bean Mouth getting shot, as this alone sounded very f***ed up. Ironically, this community is called Cartoon Community, and yet they have a prejudice towards the animation styles, especially the CalArt style. Regarding your opinion on these art styles, some of them have found success with them, with flash animation being successful with Total Drama, and the CalArts being successful with Adventure Time, Steven Universe, Gumball, Clarence, among others. Number 6, their reviewing methods. Well, yes, it's great that they want to become film critics in the future someday, but I feel like there are a few gripes I had with them. Not only that some of them are biased sometimes, but because of a few concerns regarding them. Their reviewing methods is that they would often add in a poster and give out their thoughts on them, without the script and the lack of video and audio editing. They would also make offensive comments towards their own viewers, like one of them saying they have a weak taste in movies, and more offensively, comparing movies to tragedies. The example would include describing Across the Spider-Verse to 9/11. That is definitely a f***ed up thing to say. There are a few more things, like romanticizing fictional characters. Sure, there's nothing wrong with having a crush on them, but when they're having a crush on an underage character or having an unhealthy one is what clearly rubs me the wrong way, as they would take things too far, as it's more of an unhealthy obsession that could probably damage your life and well-being. It is somewhat of a similar case with having a main character as their favorite character, despite some of them being hated by other people, as there are so many terms that they would often use in their reviews. Like one of them is woke. The reason was because of certain things like race, representation, to name some, and other terms like Mary Sue, Gary Stu, and of course, mean-spirited, which we will discuss it right now. As they hated stuff that is mean-spirited, yet they are mean-spirited towards the audience, and having a beef with anything that is silly and goofy. If they want to make a series that is dark, mature, and having a lot of lore, then that is fine. But I feel like everything I said about the funny stuff should be a welcoming addition. Again, it's great that they want to become film critics, but everything I said could link to a few problems with them. Not to mention they would often parrot people's opinions like professional reviewers. And some people even question if they even see the actual movie or not. To that I'd say, I honestly have no idea at this point. I really don't. Number 5. Slandering hated characters. When it comes to the cartoon community, it seems like one of the rules in this community is that you are supposed to spit on your least favorite character. Again, it's their opinion, but thinking that they are a spawn of Satan sounded a bit idiotic. There are a ridiculous number of characters to slander, such as Roshan, Crash, Eddie, Blue, Scrappy-Doo, Nia, Rebecca, Tater, the list goes on. To be honest, there are too many to choose from, but I feel like there's only 2 characters that I might want to use as an example. One of those targets is Johnny Test. Oh boy. There are so many hate art surrounding him. Not because he was annoying, but people claim that he ripped off Dexter's Laboratory. Even before I joined YouTube, I have seen a lot of hate art surrounding him. No disrespect to Saberspark, the person who thinks he rips off Dexter's Laboratory, but even in certain rants, I think these 2 shows have nothing in common, with Johnny Test actually being based on Scott Fellows' childhood. The other character that they would often target is Buck Cluck from Chicken Little. A plethora of people describe him as the worst father in Disney or animation altogether. Even in the movie, I know he's not perfect by any means necessary, but he did show remorse for neglecting his son. But in terms of parenting, I feel there are way worse fathers than him. The one father at the top of my head is Clay Puppyton from Moral Oral. Aside from the clips, I had never watched this show, but I remember the one clip, especially the review on Media Mementos, where he shot his son with a gun during a freaking bear hunt. That is definitely an even worse father. Well, one of them. You may think I've forgotten one. No. Already, I haven't even talked about tearing apart cartoon brats. This is mostly on preschool show characters, as these types of videos goes like this. The formula goes, talking about the episode, tearing apart the cartoon brat, making jokes to be taken out of context, making a review, and finally insulting a character. Examples include FUDW, Norman can pay the price, you name it. This is probably one of the most ludicrous way to slander a hated character I ever heard in my life. Whatever the case, it could have been a welcoming community, but when many people want to see a fictional character getting torn apart as requests by spamming them, it started becoming a problem. Believe it or not, there might have been a few incidents that happened in this community. When Matt Neff had made a parody of the Arthur episode in My Africa, where he made a poll about the episode titles, where the most voted title literally got him flagged. Hell, he even knew that this wouldn't work at the beginning of Black History Month. When some people have pointed out the problems with the community being toxic due to having a lot of spammers, I don't really blame them. I used to be part of the bandwagon of FUDW, but this community has started becoming problematic as years go by. At least Matt himself has stated that he doesn't hate DW. Overall, this is yet another instance of the cartoon community possibly being stuck in the 2010s. Fictional or not, this is probably dead horse beating at this point. I fear that if this decade goes on in terms of slandering hated characters, even in the upcoming 2030s, I feel like this is going to be a bit worse than ever. Number 4. Their prejudice for anime. This is actually an animation style that could have been best reserved for number 7, but I feel like this deserves its own ranking for a couple of reasons. First off, the notable instance is Attack on Titan. Released in 2013, it was one of the best-selling manga series of all time. But when it came to it, it would go wrong behind the scene. When the creator of the series, Hajime Asayama, had made a character based on a historical figure, people would slander him and stated, "I'm going to beat Hajime Asayama to death with a blunt object." What's more shocking is that it has a lot of messages with the same exact threats, leading up to 1,000 threats in total, mostly from copying and pasting. They would also claim that there is actually no good anime out there and anime is all bad, cartoons good, whatever. But there do exist good anime out there, like Dragon Ball, Spy X Family, One Piece, My Hero Academia, Naruto, Demon Slayer, the list goes on. But they would be butthurt over them when anime is basically a Japanese version of cartoon. Although there do exist many instances of Japanese dubs of cartoon. Adding insult to injury, it is rumored that the cartoon community had celebrated a arson attack at Kyoto Animation, and I said it was a rumor because there wasn't any evidence for it. Even if they really did it, this could have been their worst moment, as this alone sounded incredibly up for this fest community. If anime isn't really for you, that is perfectly okay, but as I said, their hatred for anime is started becoming a bit noticeable, and it started becoming unhealthy for them. If you thought weeaboos are bad, the cartoonaboos, in my opinion, are even worse than you would think. Number 3. Their history of cyberbullying plus hateums. This is yet another common problem in the cartoon community. Like 99.9% of the communities, they are no stranger to endless cyberbullying for stupid reasons. There have been several instances for which they have done so. For the sake of brevity, I'm going through one or two incidents involving artists, actors, CEOs, fans, and creators. First off, the artists. In the early to mid 2010s, John Razonsky, aka Mr. Answer, had made a rant about Pet Setter Pat, where he and his fans would go out and attack Casey Alexander on Twitter, as this alone sounded incredibly messed up, in which a year later, he regrets making this video and considered this to be his worst animated atrocities video, and apologized to him, showing that he had indeed expressed remorse for this, despite his mixels and turning red reviews. For the actors, I remember the one person would literally make a lot of hate art surrounding John Bailey, all because of his portrayal of Grapefruit, from making him a punching bag to literally killing him. The reason why he hates him is because not only does his voice sound terrible, do I really need to say it? Well, I'm gonna say it right now. The real reason why Grapefruit was recasted was that when asking Dane Bowe for a raise, it was rejected, and because of this, Bobby had decided to let John take over for him moving forward. Recasting has existed since the very beginning, unless there is no use for it. A common example of killing off a character was actually when Cars 2 was released. They killed Doc Hudson off screen due to the actor Paul Newman passing away. And the example of recasting was when the late Johnny Hardwick, the person who portrayed Dale Gribble, had passed away. They decided to let Toby Huss fill in for everyone's favorite conspiracy nut. When the Mario movie was announced, Illumination Entertainment had casted Chris Pratt as Mario. Prior to it, they hated the idea of Star-Lord portraying everyone's favorite Italian plumber, where people begged Illumination to recast him as Charles Martinet, aka the voice for him since Mario teaches typing? However, they later on accepted it due to Mario actually being from Brooklyn. For the CEOs and presidents, I think it might be worth mentioning Christina Miller, a former president of Cartoon Network, who for some up reason treated her like she is the most evil person of Cartoon Network because she let reboots be on too many time slots, and causing its downfall. I feel Christina Miller seems to be a nice person overall, but treating her like a frickin' dictator, this is definitely wrong. Funnily enough, they hated Cartoon Network at one point, but when Zaslav took over, people would claim that he is going to shut down Cartoon Network. It actually never happened. The building and the website got shut down, but the channel as a whole is still up and running. And speaking of David Zaslav, you can probably tell the reason why I hate his hate base more than him. When Warner Bros. Discovery was merged, he had made a lot of poor decisions, which consisting of tax layoffs that would include Coyote vs. Acme, Batgirl, and a certain movie that I'll get back to later. As much as I personally don't like him, deep down, I start to feel a bit bad for him. Imagine that you're a CEO who makes a lot of hot takes and getting antagonized by pissed off fans and literally being compared to notorious historical figures. The only instance of harassing fan artists is that they would make Paige Paz, aka Zammy070, attempt suicide over a fan art of Rose Quartz from Steven Universe, which went nowhere as she thankfully got the help she needed. And the one person who did that did get his ass in prison. Otherwise, these fans are just goddamn cruel. And finally, we get to the creators. When a trailer for Primos was released, there have been many arguments about the show being racist due to having stereotypes. Well, this is before the actual show was released. They had not only made nasty comments about it, but also antagonized the creator of the show, Natasha Klein, which caused her to have self-doubts. In interviews, she stated that the show was actually based on her experiences growing up in a Mexican-American family in the 90s. And the most recent one that happened was that they would harass Cooper Goodwin, aka Gooseworks, the creator of the Amazing Digital Circus, over the characters Pomni and Jax getting the freaking spotlight, causing her to close up shop on Reddit. Thankfully, her good fans came in to support her. This is literally started becoming noticeable as there are still more hate art being milked every time, possibly out of their greed. And boy, do I have a laundry list of reasons why hatems are terrible. The hatems surrounding users are not funny whatsoever. Many people claim that it's a healthy hatem. I wouldn't say it's healthy, but I would say that some of them are understandable. But hate bases tend to harass people and associates, as this is no laughing matter. As far as users go, I may not let their wrongdoing slide, but the reason why I had to rank it here is because people could be uncomfortable with them. Plus, there are times where their hatred is gonna run its course for some people. But I feel like the users who hate is the only time, only time, to keep opinions to ourselves. If you want to talk about the person you hate, you can actually make a private conversation with your friend on Discord. But by all means, this may be related to the cartoon community, but I feel like this goes for almost every single hatem. But I feel like there's one hatem that might be the worst of the cartoon community, bringing up the next section. Number 2. Slandering Disney. While Disney is not perfect given the controversies and circumstances, as I said previously, the Disney hate base is not any better in this community. I feel like there's a few things that are worth mentioning. I said them before and I say this again. For the live action remakes, behind the scenes, whenever they announced a live action remake, they would often trash and slander them for making the movies, as they would claim nobody asked for it or Disney is greedy as their main excuses. Even though I already talked about the way people treat Halle Bailey in a live action remake of The Little Mermaid, this is some of a similar case for Rachel Zegler for the Snow White remake. I kinda understand the controversies, sort of, but the memes, let alone hate art, is definitely not an excuse whatsoever. And it's very clear on social media that they have definitely sounded like a broken record. The one example in terms of the live action remakes hate base I had to bring up is Christian Diaz, aka Zayd Magenta. There's nothing much to talk about him due to everyone and their mother talking about his controversies. I had to bring it up because I argued that his hatred for Disney is similar to Channing Human's hatred for Warner Bros. Discovery's movies. If it's not for both of them, that's perfectly fine. But both of their hatred for certain studios and the movies they make is definitely an unhealthy one. With Zayd Magenta having an unhealthy hatred for Disney due to ruining Star Wars. Already I haven't even talked about the Phantom Menace. I have already said that Daisy Ridley was harassed online all because she portrayed a character from Star Wars. And I also brought up how it was kind of similar to the way people treat Jake Lloyd and Ahmed Best, who portray young Anakin Skywalker and Jar Jar Binks respectively. The former was bullied in real life in high school and suffered mental health problems, and the latter had considered suicide at first, but later changed his mind. Not to mention the same faces literally harassed the cast and crew for Acolyte and Kathleen Kennedy. Yeah, that's another reason why the Phantom Menace are the real reasons why Star Wars is ruined. Well, theoretically. As for rival culture, as much as I like certain non-Disney movies, I'm heavily against it is because they would make a lot of memes dedicated to slandering Disney movies. Hell, even some people point out the problems with these memes to the point where it's becoming clear that it's not only become a dead meme, but also aged poorly, due to 2023 being a bad year for other studios due to the WAG strikes. As a person who likes both studios and their movies, I feel I would say you may disagree with their decisions and you may like their movies, but don't take this to a whole new level. And worst of all, Mickey Mouse himself. Oh yes, I don't mind certain studios making fun of them, but for its community members, I'd say that they would demonize the mascot for Disney and make a lot of videos and hate art surrounding him and thinking that Mickey embodies Disney's controversies, when in reality, it's not the case, as this is more on the handlers themselves. Whereas the cartoon community is the new Go Anime community in my opinion. Mickey Mouse, in my opinion, is the new Caillou. The reason for that is because both the characters are treated similarly by both awful communities, except the cartoon community targets Mickey Mouse with hate art, while the Go Anime community targets Caillou with unfunny grounded videos. Even if you dislike Disney, that's perfectly okay. But as I said, Disney may not be perfect, but don't take your hatred for them to a brand new level, as we can definitely agree that the Disney hate base is worse than the company itself. Before we get to the worst moment in the cartoon community, I'm going to look at a few dishonorable mentions. Hate watching. I don't know what it is about people who like to hate watch. I mean, ever since Velma was likely released, they have done that. This is not only, in my honest opinion, a waste of money on streaming services, but also a complete waste of time. Making petitions for petty reasons. While yes, making petitions in change.org can be useful for certain things, but otherwise, there are negative aspects that they have done that, as they might be sometimes used for scams, such as making a petition to get a person to step down or canceling the show they hate. They ironically have no respect for greedy people and the characters, yet they are more greedier considering the probable nature of petitions. Villain memes. I have already talked about the worst villain memes in my honest opinion, as this is mostly from this community exclusive to DeviantArt unfortunately, as this is probably just as lazy as AI users. If anyone asks, no, ruining villain memes aren't any better. Using late people's names. The biggest example in 2019, when the late Steven Hillenburg had passed away, Nickelodeon was working on a SpongeBob spin-off, Camp Coral. They hated it as their initial reactions, as they claimed that Nickelodeon waited Hillenburg to die or disrespected Hillenburg's legacy. Their reason was because of the rumors stating that he doesn't want to have any spin-offs, but it was later debunked by storyboard artist Vincent Walker, who spoke out about it, which they had made Camp Coral before Hillenburg had passed away, and he was also involved in it. I'm not just talking about Hillenburg, but it also goes for any other late creators out there. And this is probably one of the most manipulative things the cartoon community has done, or in this case, sponge boomers. Unless some of them are valid. Treating the Golden Globes as a sport. Ever since late 2022, people have wanted to see any non-Disney movie to be awarded. It's understandable as it's just more of a preference, but people outside of the community dread award season these days. Because I heard that if Disney gets nominated or wins the award, the cartoonaboos would see this as the end of the world or a doomsday. I feel like this could have been part of the number 2 entry, but I had to put it here due to it applying to any other animated movies, as they would see it as not just a sporting event, but also console wars. It's never really the case, as it's just an annual ceremony that celebrates people's works, their ego. Probably one of the biggest traits in the cartoon community. I know other communities had one, but I feel like this community, in my opinion, has possibly the biggest ego of them all. As for why they likely have one, it's mostly due to them being the heroes of animation. And this made me very annoyed because it's not the case at all, as they are absolutely not the heroes of animation whatsoever. It's just more of a community that likes to talk about their favorite animated movies and shows. Number 1. The Fixed Incident. In mid-2025, Netflix had saved a shelf animated movie called Fixed. Prior to its release, many people went to see this movie and what it's about, but Warner Bros. Discovery initially shelved it. And then, a year later, after development hell and years in the making, it was finally released. Despite people wanting to see this movie and what it's about, for some reason, they hated it and panned it. Oh boy, I have a lot to say about it. Let me emphasize that I am not forcing people to like this movie. I personally don't like it either, but I can only say this may have been similar to previous centuries like silencing opinions and cyberbullying, but this may have been at its worst. Keep in mind, this movie was created by Genndy Tartakovsky, the person behind Dexter's Laboratory, Samurai Jack, Hotel Transylvania, the list goes on. And he had wanted to get this movie released, as it took him several years to make. The reason why it's their worst moment, in my opinion, is that they would not only harass and antagonize the animators for this movie, but they also sent them death threats. In the wake of this, animator Uli Mayer had posted the image on Instagram of the character Bull committing suicide, almost identical to the artwork about Uncle Grandpa committing suicide. As it clearly states that it's more about him distancing himself from social media. This is literally devastating, as this is not just their worst moment, but also cyberbullying one too many times. This movement from this community may also explain the real reason why certain studios have been fighting back against toxic fandoms and having trust issues with them. The death threats alone definitely shows how cruel this community was, and this is yet another hypocrisy, as they hated this movie despite liking certain things similar to Fixed. And people are gonna ask someone if they're gonna get the police involved. To that I say, I'm not sure. Even if they watch a documentary or two, they would have at least understood that everyone's life wasn't easy. But I guess not, because these cartoonaboos are completely in denial and never even cared whatsoever. And due to this, as a former cartoon community member, the cartoonaboos deserve the backlash after this incident. So, we have come to this. I decided to give out my final thoughts on the cartoon community's controversies, and this is going to be a long one. Distancing myself from the cartoon community is not an easy task, mainly because there are so many cartoons that I personally enjoy and want to talk about from time to time. But the more I learned about it, the more I realized that I never seem to fit in with a community that is once a friendly and welcoming community to an insufferable concentration camp. For a community that states that they have a heart and soul, it started becoming clear the cartoonaboos had neither of those traits due to the fixed incident and other stupid things that they have done. And I know that people are going to ask me in the comment section saying, have I tried to ignore them and move on with my life? Well, truthfully, I had. But wow, I was confronted with the cartoonaboos still antagonizing people, controversial or not, as I feel like this is the reason why not only would people look down at animation these days, but the cartoon community being permanently tarnished thanks to the cartoonaboos being insufferable faces who didn't show any remorse whatsoever in the slightest. And I still don't even think the cartoonaboos is going to receive a wake-up call that people hated us for how we acted. And I have made it very clear that I absolutely want nothing to do with the cartoon community after what the cartoonaboos did in 2023, as this year, in my opinion, shows them at their worst. Despite what others may say, I will say that Mr. Enter did not cause the cartoon community for what it is today, but I feel the damage was already done. I know that there are way worse communities out there, but I feel this community has taken a turn for the worst ever since late 2022. And you can call me a hypocrite for liking cartoons and adding in certain seasons in future videos for snippet use, but it is mostly for the stuff I mostly enjoyed, and I still like them and make fan art everywhere I do so. But I want to be realistic because I have no choice but to speak out about my experiences within this community. I also noticed that some people are still joining the cartoon community to this day. And to be honest, I have no problem with people joining the cartoon community these days. If you still want to take part of the cartoon community, I am perfectly okay with this. But you have to understand that my experience with the cartoon community is flat out unhealthy and uncomfortable. And I have one thing to say to not just the cartoon community, but almost every single fandom and hater. Never let hate consume you. Words to live by.